we have three candidates running for U.S. Congress. And this is the U.S. House of Representatives, District 4. We have Joceline, Berrios, Jason Bulger, and George Selmont, right? Candidates, again, in 90 seconds, I'm going to ask you to please state your name, the office you're seeking, and then answer the following question. What do you think are the most important solutions at the federal level to address sea level rise and flooding? Who wants to kick that one off?
Hello, thank you for being here. Can you hear me? Oh, there we go. My name is Joceline Berrios, and I'm running as an NPA, no party affiliation candidate, to replace Rutherford. And my background is I was a public school teacher last year. I've served in the U.S. Air Force. I attended the Air Force Academy. And I am running because I think we need a change for the other 99%. Not that I'm going to ignore the top 1%, but I'm here trying to get the voice of everyday people, common needs, working people, and senior citizens, Social Security. And I think that part of what's concerning me about this discussion is that I've lived in California and I lived in Puerto Rico. I'm Puerto Rican. And what I keep hearing here in Florida is, who cares what happened with a hurricane in Puerto Rico? The island is corrupt. If it goes down in flames and nothing ever gets fixed, we don't care. In California, I would hear people who said, we don't care if the mansions slide down the hill in Malibu, they're millionaires, I'm sure they have it insured. So what concerns me the most is that we need to come together, we need to unite. And right now we have government leaders that are doing the exact opposite. They're spreading lies and hate and divisiveness. And we could come up with the best solutions on earth, but if we don't help everyone, there's a lot of people in Jacksonville that are not going to want to pay extra taxes or pass bond measures or anything else that it's going to take to fix this problem. So we need to work together to solve our problems.
Thank you, Joceline. Jason?
Hi, I'm Jason Bulger. I'm running for United States House of Representatives for District 4. I'm a husband and a father and a veteran of the United States Army, and I've decided to run for Congress because I don't think the Republicans and Democrats can really work together. As far as solving sea level rise at the federal level, the solution I think we need most is a comprehensive understanding of the problem and the adequate deployment of resources to the local and state agencies that will be doing the groundwork. Thank you.
Thank you. Jerry? George?
My name is George Selmont.
Yeah.
I'm the Democratic candidate for Congress in District 4. District 4, as you know, runs from the Georgia border down to St. Augustine Beach, runs west to Hastings, Yulee, Callahan, Bryceville, contains 735,000 people, and all different types of business and development. The problem that we're talking about, sea level rise, is an ecosystem problem, and there is no one answer, no singular answer to it. We need a holistic approach to tackling a problem such as this. Obviously, resiliency has to be built into our cities. In Jacksonville, we had our skyscraper flood in a tropical storm. Second is, we need to, and I have to think of what the verb is, we will have to rejoin in the future, not unjoin the Paris Climate Accords. We need a federal government that believes that climate change is happening and admits that it's happening. And thirdly, we do need individuals to do what they can do to protect our environment. And that is everything from putting pressure on businesses to stop using plastic straws, supermarkets to stop using plastic bags, and to push for renewable, clean energy grid.
Okay, thank you. Now I'm going to ask the following questions of all the candidates, and maybe we'll begin with you, Joceline. According to current flood IQ data, sea level rise plus a hurricane of just Category 1 would cause flooding-related damage in 15,366 homes in Florida. What can we do now to protect these areas, these homes?
Oh, sorry, that was...
Whoever wants to pick this up, it's for all candidates.
Sure. Well, now to prevent loss, we absolutely have to work on resiliency. The first thing is that we need to rebuild and reinforce our system of pumps. We have an area in Jacksonville, San Marco, that floods every time there's a thunderstorm. The loss of revenue to businesses in that area that have to shut down or that lose customers when there's a thunderstorm is then compounded by the losses to individuals' homes and cars. So in the near term, what we need to do is work on resiliency for our whole area. But again, this is a holistic approach that we need to take, and while we're working on those short-term goals to protect individual homeowners and businesses, we need to be working on carbon tax, rejoining the Paris Climate Accords, et cetera.
Okay, thank you. Jason?
Could you repeat the question, please?
According to current flood IQ data, sea level rise plus a hurricane of just Category 1 would cause flooding-related damage in 15,366 homes in Florida. What can we do now to protect these areas, these homes?
I'm not really sure what we can do right now to protect these homes. It's going to be a local and state, excuse me, local, state, and individual response. If your home's going to flood, you need to do something about it. I hope to understand the problem at a federal level and provide the necessary support. But I can't help you if your house is flooded right now. I don't know what to do.
Honest answer.
Well, there are many things that we can do, and one of the things that I haven't heard is let's work with other areas that have dealt with flooding for centuries. For example, we could hold a conference here on sea level rise and invite people from Holland, invite people from Venice, and see what they've been doing to combat sea level rise. But some of the things that we can do is, I lived in an area where before a major flooding event, they would give out free sand to put sandbags up, and people were just told, please bring your sandbags, bring the bags to fill up with sand, and the hours and the place and how to get there, and it was free. And if people didn't know where to get the sandbags, they would tell them, okay, you can buy them at Home Depot for X amount of dollars. So that's something that we can do. I've also noticed that here in Jacksonville area, there aren't a lot of public service announcements that help people prepare in the event of any kind of a hurricane or any kind of other major event that affects the entire area. So perhaps more education, not only like in California where I'm from, where we have a lot of earthquake drills, have some hurricane drills where we know exactly what we're going to need and how to prepare.
Thank you. All right. Next question. Under what conditions do you feel it's appropriate to use tax dollars to fund sea level rise resilience activities? And what efforts, if any, would you champion in Congress to fund resilience efforts for sea level rising and flooding?
As far as specific efforts, I'm not aware of any that I would support right now. I need to do more research about this topic. What was the first part of the question?
Under what conditions do you feel it's appropriate to use tax dollars to fund resilience activities?
Wherever it's threatening the public land or the public interest.
But not private?
Not necessarily private properties.
Okay. George?
I'm not sure on the rules, but we're allowed to call a friend, right?
Good luck.
Well, I'm the Democrat here, so I think you can guess what my answer is. My answer is that this is a problem for the federal government to take the lead in. I think that under Ronald Reagan made it popular and in vogue to blame our government and call our government a do-nothing government. Our government has the ability to do incredible, incredible things, and large engineering, large infrastructure, those are the things that our government does the best. So in terms of resiliency, this is something that the federal government and federal dollars are needed to do. This is not something that we can count on municipalities to do, for a number of reasons. Municipalities have 2-year terms for a lot of the people who are there, and also a lot of people in municipalities are not full-time administrators. So you're asking people who are volunteering their evenings on a zoning or a wetlands commission to tackle the issue of rising tides. So the federal government has to take the lead in this, yes.
Okay, thank you. Jocelyn?
Well, I would say that if we have money for a space force, we have money for infrastructure and government funding to help out here in Florida, especially since Florida has the most coastline.
Alaska.
I was going to say, but after Alaska. Okay, but I wasn't sure.
Michigan has the second, then Florida.
Excuse me?
The Great Lakes have more coastline than Florida.
Okay then. Let me rephrase that. I'm going to rephrase it this
But we
way.
digress.
The lifeblood of Florida is people retire here because of the climate, because of how close you can get to the ocean, because of the beautiful beaches. So I think that the federal government does have to help out. And I think that if we can put a man on the moon, we can definitely do things to combat climate change that we ourselves have created and help out the people here, private and public. But I do think that we should be buying up some more land to create more watershed and more areas where the water can go rather than the high-density developments that cause some of the issues.
Thank you. Next question. What is your single most significant personal or professional accomplishment regarding either sea level rise, the environment, energy conservation, or sustainability? Whichever wants to take a whack at that one first.
Well, I don't know if it's my most significant, but the one that hit me 1-2 was in September. Not only did we have the hurricane disaster in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, but also there was the earthquake in Mexico. And one of my students, I'm a public school teacher for over 20 years, the top level of our house was destroyed because of the earthquake. So I'm dealing with people I know in Mexico that are suffering, and I'm dealing with my family in Puerto Rico that is shell-shocked by the complete collapse of the infrastructure and the electric grid. So I was actually online 24/7 translating from people from the island through an app on the phone called Zillow, Z-E-L-L-O, to actually tell the National Guard which streets were blocked, which bridges were down, which areas were having major issues, which areas were completely blacked out and you couldn't get to. So I did that for many, many days online.
Fascinating. And Jason?
Well, mine's not nearly so good. I went to a Tidal town hall once.
Okay. George?
For me, and this is not, this doesn't have federal reach, but about 15 years ago in another state, I served multiple terms on a conservation commission. And what the Conservation Commission did was it sat between planning and zoning and wetlands and ultimate approval. So any projects that were going through the town had to also go through a Conservation Commission. And while I'm sure this gentleman would not like an extra step to go through in terms of getting projects in the coastline accomplished, what it did was it made sure that everybody along the process, builders, developers, engineers, architects, knew that the project had to go through a conservation commission, that conservation and the effect of it on the environment was going to be something that had to be stamped before the building or the project got approved. And I think that's something that should be adopted by more counties and municipalities down here.
Thank you. Next question. The majority of funding from the federal government can only be spent after an area is hit by a disaster. For example, FEMA spends less than 1% of its budget on pre-disaster mitigation. And the Stafford Act provides federal funding only after an area is hit. Would you want to change these policies to encourage more spending to mitigate pre-disaster, and if so, how?
Given the situation in New Orleans and in Puerto Rico, I am circumspect about giving FEMA more money and more control. I don't think that they have been effective in either of those situations. I do think that resiliency is something that needs to be planned for, and I think that it's not a FEMA issue.
Right? Jason or Jocelyn? Jason, go ahead.
Can you read?
Oh, the question again? The majority of funding from the federal government can only be spent after an area is hit by a disaster. For example, FEMA spends less than 1% of its budget on pre-disaster mitigation, and the Stafford Act provides federal funding only after an area is hit. Would you want to change these policies to encourage more spending to mitigate pre-disaster, and if so, how?
Absolutely, I think we should be trying to get involved. Especially with a disaster like a hurricane, we have, in some cases, upwards of a week's notice that the storm is coming. We can be preparing resources and allocating funds before the storm is even hit. If the storm swerves, as they so often do, and hits somewhere else, we can easily move the money allocated for one disaster to another. So I don't see why we wait until after to begin addressing a problem.
Just so you know, I think we're talking about rising sea levels and not so much hurricanes, but if you want to add anything more on that.
Yeah, we need to do some preparation before the sea level actually rises. We're not going to be able to do much once the land's already under the water.
Okay, thank you. Joceline.
Well, as I've learned, our current administration is not a very forward-thinking administration. So yes, we need people in Congress that do think about the future. I was a school teacher for 20 years. Obviously, the investment there is for the future of the students and their families. And there are a lot of things that the federal government should do. For example, after Hurricane Katrina, the actor Brad Pitt had a nonprofit organization that actually helped to rebuild homes that were actually 5 feet above the ground level, and they were built such that the roofs were all flat and had an escape hatch so that people who were trapped and died in their attics trying to get away from the rise of the water, that would not happen. They could actually be picked up by a boat or a raft or something like that. So we could actually provide incentives. The federal government could provide incentives to people who follow certain building codes and specifications that would make their homes more seaworthy, so to speak, to have more resiliency against sea level rise and flooding and even hurricanes.
Okay, thank you. George, have you answered that one?
I'll talk again.
Okay, all right. All right, thank you. All right, now I'm going to address this to just a single candidate. The National Flood Insurance Program currently blocks the ability for an organized retreat, as it requires people to rebuild in the very same location. How can the National Flood Insurance Program be addressed to ensure sea level rise is accounted for?
Which candidate?
Try, Jocelyn, why don't you pick that up?
Well, I think that the program should be changed so that actually what they do is provide some financial help to have you build or buy a home someplace else. So I really think that that would make more sense. There are some people who already know they're in a bad area, they want to get out, but all their money's tied up in that property. Maybe they just need a little bit of help to have a down payment on a home in a safer area so that they don't have to go through this all the time. Because like I said, I grew up in Puerto Rico and it's no fun, you know, seeing the little rafts going down the street, you know, every couple of years or whatever the case may be.
Do you see that as a major problem for the flood insurance program to be tweaked that way so that people can actually take the money, leave the house and move somewhere else?
If we can get a military parade put together in November for this president, we can find a way to fund people who need to move out of harm's way.
Okay.
If we can put a man on the moon, if that's better for you, we can find a way to
That's
fund.
good. We're on the campaign trail. All right. Jason, this one's for you. Low-income residents are frequently disproportionately impacted by hurricanes. How can Congress address recovery assistance to low-income people?
Specifically for low income,
Mm-hmm.
probably faster response from FEMA.
Mm-hmm.
Better provision of the assistance in the immediate aftermath of the storm. I remember back, I think it was 2004, I think it was after Hurricane Ivan, we went, our power was out for several weeks and we didn't have any food, and we went down to the airport and got MREs and water from the National Guard. So more stuff like that, providing in-kind resources to them in that moment of great need.
One of the earlier questions on the other level, I think the local level, we mentioned about the government phones and the number of minutes. Would you see that that would be an advantage if the number of minutes were increased?
Yeah, the number of minutes is a very arbitrary number they just agreed on. We could easily switch it to an unlimited plan under emergency conditions, and I see no reason not to.
Okay, thank you.
May I ask you?
Yep.
Briefly?
Yeah, sure.
After the hurricane in Puerto Rico, these cell phone companies, some of them like AT&T, did give free minutes to the people of Puerto Rico so that they could reach relatives and try to make arrangements after the hurricane. So there could be some sort of incentives to give tax breaks to companies that help after an emergency and give extra minutes to anyone who might need them. I mean, I thought that was a really big plus for the companies that did that. It really created a great deal of goodwill.
Okay, thank you. George, this next one is for you. In what ways do you believe sea level rise is related to human impact on the environment? This is the big picture.
I'll agree to answer that question if when I finish, you will say, and now we take you to Larry King in his entirety.
Okay.
Because we don't want to hear you say that.
All right.
And there will be time. I believe in climate change. I believe in global warming. I believe that mankind is responsible for this. I believe in science. I believe that dinosaurs roam the earth. The earth is round. I think that when you look at the human body and you look at what the effect of half a Benadryl or half an aspirin can do to you, when you look at a car's gas tank and you think about what a tablespoon of sugar can do to that, looking at our earth and our ecosystem and what 150 years of industrial revolution can do to an ecosystem, yeah, I certainly believe that.
And now we return you to Larry King. Next question. At the national level, I think we're going to let you, each one of you, take a whack at these questions if you'd like. At the national level, how do you think the U.S. should address the root causes of sea level rise and warming? Are there specific solutions such as international agreements, carbon fee and dividends, innovation technology incentives, or other measures that you would champion in Washington? At the national level, how do you think the U.S. should address the root causes of sea level rise and warming, and are there specific solutions you could?
Yes to all of the above. As in, we do need to work with everyone worldwide who is willing to do like the Paris Climate Accord, and come together and share best practices. Also, California, for example, has banned single-use plastic bags, and people have gotten used to bringing their own tote bags in, and it's really not that big of a deal. If you still want a single-use plastic bag, it costs you 10 cents each. So it's not like you can't have it, it's just that they're kind of letting you know that that costs money. And as you have said, as he has said, we should do the recycling program where you actually get refunded for turning in cans and plastic items, because I actually have heard a story about Mexican immigrant parents who put their kids through college by collecting and returning plastic cans. And it also helps, for example, the homeless population to find a little bit of income now and again. And a lot of school, I was a school teacher, a lot of school projects around recycling are always fun to do.
Thank you. Jason, you want to take a whack at that?
Can you repeat it though?
At the national level, how do you think the U.S. should address the root causes of sea level rise and warming? Are there specific solutions like international agreements, carbon fee and dividends, innovation technology incentives, or other measures that you would champion in Washington?
All of those components will be important, but the most important is going to be innovating a better energy storage technology. Right now, the main advantage coal and oil offer over all of their competitors, such that they have an advantage, is that they are both a generation technology and a storage technology. So we need to get better energy storage technology so that we can more readily utilize the renewable energy sources, because I believe that the massive dumping of carbon into the atmosphere is primarily responsible for this warming.
Good observation. Okay. George?
My father-in-law is from India, so we have gone to India, and one of his nephews is an economist. And we were there a summer ago, and he said to me, I'm doing some research. One of the highest causes of death here is respiratory lung cancer from the air. What's the rate of people dying, environmental deaths in America? And I was like, are you kidding me? I mean, that's not barely a blip. And you can poison a country's air so badly that lung cancer from breathing is a large percentage of death. That is why the United States needs to be a leader. When we forfeit the lead in the world, when we opt out of something like the Paris Climate Accords, when we don't take countries that are developing up to our level in China and India and share with them, license to them, I just think that means we got a first down. When we license to them our technology and we let them jump over the coal years that we had to go through and go to a clean, renewable grid, that's when we are world leader and we can solve problems such as climate.
Thank you very much, George. Your observations about India are bang on. Next question, do you think that clean energy and carbon capture technology are part of the long-term solution to sea level rise? And if so, what role should the government play in spurring technological innovation and adoption? That's clean energy and carbon capture technology. So, go ahead, George.
I'm sorry, Joceline.
Go ahead, I'll get into the first half.
I'll read it again.
Yeah, if you don't
Do you think clean energy and carbon capture technology are part of the long-term solution to sea level rise? And if so, what role should the government play in spurring technological innovation and adoption?
Sure. I certainly think that both those issues are a major component in sea level rise. And as I said before, I do believe this is a holistic solution that we have to have. So those are not the only issues that we have to address. Government is good at spurring innovation. Americans are great at innovating. That is what private industry does. We innovate in technology. And the same way as Joceline has said, we can make it to the moon. We can foster clean and renewable energy in this country. We need to break the fossil fuel hegemony. We need to break the bond that fossil fuel has on all of us, from paving roads with petroleum-based tarmac to gas automobiles and coal power plants. And it's something that we can do.
All right, thank you. Joceline?
Driving through California, you'll see a lot of the windmills on the hills. And I know that there's people who don't like the way they look. I love the way they look. I love what they stand for. They stand for a cleaner future. They stand for we don't have to be dependent on the big oil companies. And I think that that's something that I would like to see a lot more solar energy. And as a matter of fact, in Puerto Rico, they've put up a lot more solar panels as a fast way to get some power on the island after the hurricane because of the wire mess that was all over the place there. So I know that in a just personal anecdote, real tiny example, okay, the light went out in my house in Sacramento, and I was able to pick up one of those little solar lights from the lawn and use it as my flashlight for the next 2 days. I'm just saying, look how far that technology has come. I know that seems like something simple, but if we could have solar panels, at least in public buildings like libraries and schools, we can save a lot of energy that way.
Thank you. Here's a question that has just been handed. Fossil fuels are the primary culprit behind climate change. In the United States, they're responsible for over 80% of greenhouse gas emissions and 98% of CO2 emissions alone. What is your position on offshore drilling in state and federal waters?
It's a dangerous waste of time and effort.
Can you elaborate?
Sure. Oil and coal are on the way out, so we don't really need to be exploring new places for them. And the ocean-based rigs have shown a devastating capacity to destroy things when they go even the slightest bit wrong.
Mhm.
So we should stop doing dangerous things that might go wrong when we don't need to be doing them.
Do we need the energy that's in the water?
No, we can develop other sources of energy.
Okay, thank you. George, you want to take it?
Sure. We need both a drilling ban off Florida and a fracking ban. Fracking is the gateway drug to drilling, and make no mistake about that. What is so appalling about this is that our opponent, John Rutherford, said that he and a number of congressmen signed a letter that we won't drill off Florida. Well, when you're the party that's in control of the House and the Senate, the presidency and the Supreme Court, you pass legislation. You don't write a letter. So if the Republicans are really serious about not drilling off Florida, then they won't write a letter. They will pass legislation.
Yes, I also believe in banning fracking and offshore oil drilling. Growing up, I did live through an oil spill, and it was absolutely horrible. I still to this day remember the smell, how everything looked. And Florida relies so much on tourism. We can't really afford to have our beaches messed up for years and years. And you know, one of the beautiful things that I love most about Florida is all the water birds everywhere that I have to ask people, what are they? Because I never saw them before. And I don't want to see them dead. I don't want to see them covered in oil. So we need to ban fracking and offshore oil drilling. And also fracking is causing earthquakes in parts of the world where have never really been earthquakes before, and really bad earthquakes. And another thing that I wanted to bring up, I just forgot what it was. No fracking, no offshore oil drilling. Escaped my mind, sorry. But those are two things that I definitely would not want to see in Florida. Florida's ecosystem is very delicate from what I've seen already, and we don't need to be bringing that kind of mess here. So yes, I'm all for banning both of those methods of oil extraction.
Thank you. I got one quick question, and I'll give you 30 seconds, each one of you. We talked a lot about putting fossil fuels behind us. What, if anything, should be done to promote renewable energy? Quickly, 30 seconds, what would you do when you're in Congress?
I would try to get more grants to colleges and universities that find more innovative ways to, and start contests. Instead of the robotics types contests, start some contests on what is the best way that we can use renewable energy, especially solar and wind, clean energy, and give out scholarships and awards and make a really big deal to have our young people already thinking in those terms rather than thinking in the crutch of we're always going to have oil and we're always going to have coal.
Can you repeat the question?
All right, we're trying to put fossil fuels behind us according to the theme and the feeling I got from all three candidates here. What, if anything, should be done to promote renewable energy to replace it?
Education and innovation. We need to educate the general populace about the abundance of energy coming into this planet from the sun. Every hour and 15 minutes we receive approximately the same amount of solar irradiation as we use in energy in a year. So we don't even have to get close on efficiency for that. Getting past coal and oil, they are very complex, very valuable molecules, and burning them to keep our society going like this is a lot like burning books to stay warm. It's pretty foolish.
Thank you, George.
Federal government needs to encourage a public-private partnership on electric car charging stations on the federal highways so that it is feasible for electric cars to be daily use for everybody.
All right, thank you. Well, that was fun. I want to thank Joceline, Berrios, George Selmont, and Jason Bulger. Bulger, for being here tonight. Please give them a round.